Objectively speaking, there is very little positive I can say about the first presidential debate. I expected cringe, and I enjoy cringe. But I at least like my cringe intelligible. It's hard enough to understand Joe Biden under normal circumstances. It's harder still with the president constantly talking over him and Chris Wallace trying to save the day for Joe too. Bottom line, I didn't like anybody. I thought the president was way too aggressive with interruption. Joe was uncoiling the rope to hang himself with a series of lies if you just give him a little more room to talk. And Chris Wallace did one of the poorer jobs of moderation I can remember. And while it's expectedly fashionable in media and political circles to hate solely on the president for this one, I think it's a mistake to assume that the voters who matter do the same. Just because the president performed somewhat poorly, and I agree that he did, doesn't mean anybody else necessarily looks any better either. Take a look at this post-debate show of hands from the CNN panel of undecided voters.
Who in this group, raise your hand if you thought Joe Biden won the debate? One person, okay. Show of hands if you thought Donald Trump won the debate. As you can see, there was really no clear winner here in this group.
And actually, Chris Wallace is the most bummed. He tried his hardest to win the debate, and he couldn't even get a single vote. And we can sit and break down why so few were particularly impressed. I think there were plenty of opportunities on policy and claims of fact that Joe Biden left wide open and the president failed to land a hit on. But besides the incoherent crosstalk, there was only one moment for which this debate will be remembered anyway. You already see it in all of the headlines the morning after. Trump refuses to condemn white supremacists. Trump's jarring white supremacist moment launches furor. And speaking of furors, fascism is at our door, and the outrage is growing because Trump refuses to denounce white supremacy. All of this, of course, in reference to this debate moment when Chris Wallace and Joe Biden asked Trump to do that, and he responded, "Stand back and stand by."
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
Sure. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
white supremacists. Like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
That is the moment that will be run into the ground. It was fodder for every pundit on the night.
The president was directly asked to denounce white supremacy and the Proud Boys. The president said, "Stand back and stand by," which is not a denunciation.
The commander-in-chief refused to condemn white supremacy.
President Trump told the Proud Boys to stand by. I think all of us are struggling to grapple with the enormity of that.
Stephen Colbert said it was one of the most upsetting moments of his lifetime.
One of the most upsetting moments, not only of the night, but of my lifetime.
If a guy saying words you don't like is one of the worst moments of your life, that's a pretty good indicator you don't live in a world of rampant white supremacist violence, actually, to speak a general truth. But more frustrating than the disavowal purity testing are the specifics that set the stage for this moment. It was a series of lies, and everyone outraged is apparently intent on maintaining some illusion otherwise, but it is crucial to recognize the entire premise of this moment was bunk. The popular callback for this exchange is, of course, Charlottesville. Ooh, the president winked and nodded at Nazis before, and now he's doing it again. That's the line that you'll hear, and that's the premise that Wallace used to frame this entire segment on race.
Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville 3 years ago, when he talked about very fine people on both sides, was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
It's the purported basis for Biden's campaign. It's the basis for this debate segment. Is anyone going to acknowledge that it has no basis in truth? The part they never play from Trump's press conference that day, August 15th, 2017, is Trump saying explicitly, clearly, the neo-Nazis should be condemned totally.
And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay?
The callback is bunk, but so are the present references. Everyone is scrutinizing Trump's insufficient response without scrutinizing the premises of the question. The response is only illegitimate if the question is legitimate, but it too is another media fairy tale. Chris Wallace said that white supremacist provocation at least partially explains the violence in Portland and Kenosha.
To condemn white supremacists and militia groups, and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
Where is the evidence for this? First of all, if the Proud Boys are a violent white supremacist group, it's pretty weird that they have an Afro-Cuban leader who explicitly condemns violence.
If my mere presence or my mere announcement that I'm coming makes somebody want to commit acts of violence towards us, it's not really my fault. I'm not really the problem. It's the people that want to commit acts of violence towards people they don't agree with.
And you're telling me that has a primary responsibility for Portland's violence? Almost all of Portland's political violence happens in the direction he's talking about. Fringe leftists attacking anybody else. It happens whether the Proud Boys show up or not. The worst recent case of Portland violence was outright political murder by a fringe Antifa loyalist. It doesn't matter if Adolf Hitler shows up. It doesn't matter if Mahatma Gandhi shows up. After over 100 days of intermittent destruction and attacks, left-wing violence is the only Portland constant. Add the feds, remove the feds. Add the Proud Boys, remove the Proud Boys. Add Patriot Prayer, remove Patriot Prayer. It doesn't matter. The violence continues because Portland is the Dr. Seuss story of leftist rioting. They will riot here or there. They will riot anywhere. They will kick you in your face, so you better bring your mace. It's an even more head-scratching stretch to blame what happened in Kenosha on white supremacists, though. There is no basis for that claim other than completely made-up Democrat talking points. Is Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist? Good luck with that claim. Not even PolitiFact can carry that one across the finish line. Is the Kenosha Guard white supremacist? You be the judge. Here's the group's leader, a former city alderman who made the call to defend the city that night.
I think our local and state leaders failed us right away.
Through his Facebook group, the Kenosha Guard, he invited armed citizens to protect the city against, quote, evil thugs.
I agree with these protesters. I'm sickened by what happened, right? But the folks that come here that want to burn down people's homes, that want to cause millions of dollars in property damage, those are evil thugs to me.
Not only does that not sound white supremacist to me, it sounds admirable. It sounds worthy of praise, not condemnation. This guy's not hating anybody. He's sympathetic with the protesters, but he will protect his community from an overwhelming mob bent on destruction. And that is the fault of the premise behind this entire controversy. It is based on nothing close to the truth. The claims are outright made up, and they throw innocent people under the bus. To accept Wallace's question, you have to accept the smearing of innocent people who did nothing wrong. They simply exercised their First Amendment rights, and they defended their lives and their property from attackers. So no, I don't accept your call to disavow, because I don't accept your premise. That is the correct answer. And Trump did start to explain it, but Wallace and Biden broke out the disavowal clubs before the point could be fully made.
Almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
And yeah, perhaps you disagree with that claim of fact. Perhaps you start typing on Google and you pull up examples of right-wing violence, or you go back to Charlottesville and say proper characterization of the participants or not. It doesn't excuse the violence. And that's a fine standard. Violence should be condemned regardless of perspective. I applaud you for holding Trump to that standard, and since it is a standard, meaning applicable to all, I look forward to your application of it to Biden, because even beyond the bogus claims of fact, that is the part of this reaction for which I have absolutely no respect. If the standard is violent extremists must be condemned, where is the proportional outrage over this statement from Joe?
Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing. This is a left-wing problem.
White supremacist. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got to be
not
kidding.
malicious. That's what his FBI director said.
Well, even if it is just an idea, a hell of a lot of ideas were expressed all over this federal courthouse all summer long. Who did that? And do you condemn the idea of vandalism and attacks on police or not. But of course, it's not just an idea. It is an organized group. It's called Rose City Antifa. The first sentence of the Wikipedia page explicitly calls it a group. It's a group that characterizes itself as unapologetic about physical militancy. And there are corresponding organizations across the country committing similar and routine acts of violence and destruction. All that plus the characterization of FBI Director Christopher Wray's commentary isn't precisely accurate. He did say Antifa is an ideology, not an organization. That is true. But he also said the FBI is less concerned with ideological classifications and more concerned with tracking violence. He characterized Antifa activists as a real thing. They are violent anarchist extremists, and anarchists are part of the group he says are responsible for the most lethal violence in the country this year. Worse still, this was a prepared response Biden had in his back pocket in case Antifa came up, and it's not even a true representation. Biden prepped this planned strategy that if he was challenged on Antifa, he would deflect and appeal to a Trump official rather than confront the truth. That shows that not only did Joe Biden fail to condemn these violent extremists, he thought ahead of time about how most credibly to minimize them. And none of this is a defense of Trump. This is a defense of standards. If we all must be subjected to shrieking outrage about the moral duty to condemn violent extremists on command, there must be some outrage more evenly shrieked in the other direction to maintain any credibility at all. Shriek until you wake Joe up from his 9 a.m. nap, and maybe then you'll be taken seriously as an alleged opponent of political violence in this country. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.